Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the Haydn Symphony Crusade. Gosh, we're just blowing through these things. Isn't it wonderful? We're up to Symphony number 91 in E-flat major. This is the middle symphony of a triptych written for Paris, as numbers 82 through 87 were. And it's the least known of all of them, easily. I don't know anyone who's ever performed it. Maybe one of you have. I don't know. Boy, it's such a great piece. It's the last Haydn symphony without trumpets and timpani. After this, trumpets and timpani become part of the standard symphony orchestra. And it was Haydn who kind of did that with numbers 92 through 104. It is an elegant symphony, a charming symphony, a witty symphony. It's, in a way, we're almost sorry that Haydn started to use trumpets and drums all the time, because the symphony becomes more grandiose. It becomes bigger. I mean, that's part of the evolution of the symphony. And of course, we celebrate that because everyone else picked up on it and we all know where it went. But there's something so wonderfully warm and intimate and chamber-like about this piece. It's as if Haydn knew he was saying farewell to that more intimate, dimensioned symphony that he had been writing for Prince Esterhazy for most of his career. And I don't know. It has a very special quality, the symphony. It really, really does. In its thematic material, in its erudition, in its whole character. And I hope I can somehow bring that out in talking about it. We don't have tons of musical examples to go through because it's a very, very straightforward piece. It really is. It's just the way that Haydn assembles his material and the harmonic process, which I think makes it so, well, there's a coziness to it. It's really, really delightful. Anyway, the symphony begins with an introduction. All of Haydn's symphonies begin with introductions from number 90 onwards, actually from a few before that. He'd been writing introductions. He likes introductions. Why does he like introductions? Well, because having an introduction gives you the opportunity to do all kinds of things when you begin the main allegro quick section of the symphony. You can start pianissimo. You can start with a very delicate theme. You could start off tonic, as they say. That is, in another key that only gradually settles into the main key. You can do fun things, and you can relate the opening of the symphony to the introduction, that is the introduction to the opening of the allegro section, in many interesting ways. And this is one of those, because the entire symphony, well, it's maybe pushing it a little bit, but a lot of the ideas in the symphony stem from the music of the introduction. And the music of the introduction is really curious. It's basically an arpeggio, ya da da. Then it goes up, then it goes down, bum bum bum. Couldn't be easier. But then he fills in the gaps in the arpeggio, so you get scales, da 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 da, like that, and that's all this introduction basically does. There's like a few little melodic Gucci's in between statements, but essentially he's just making scales and arpeggios up and down. And if they're very simple going up, then they're a little bit more lyrical and melodic and filigreed going down, and vice versa, as we shall see as the symphony proceeds. Sometimes they're a little bit more elaborate going up, and then very, very, very simple going down. But that's the basic idea behind the symphony. And as with most Haydn symphonies, the essential material is so simple as to be, primitive. It's the essence out of which music is made. And Haydn is going to show us what wonderful music he can make from it. So what I would like to do to get us hopping is play you the complete introduction and exposition. I don't want to do them separately because they're so closely related thematically. when you hear the opening of the symphony, ya da 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 da, you go, oh, it's just the introduction, things speeded up, which we heard in number 90 similarly. But, it was a similar concept, but the music is entirely different. And the way it starts is entirely different too, because, 90 was very edgy and explosive. This is gracious. It's and waltz-like. It's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2. It's this wonderful lilt to the music, but it has very, very powerful episodes. As with many Haydn symphonies, you're never quite sure how quick the music's going to go until it goes. And then you realize that there's been this enormous energy all along. This is one of those. It's one of those expositions. So let's listen to, Adam Fischer with the Austro-Hungarian Haydn Orchestra on Nimbus, or Brilliant Classics if you got the licensed version that they licensed to Brilliant Classics. But in any case, here it is. There is a very well-developed second subject, which is actually based on the first, but not to the degree that you would call this a monothematic sonata form. You'll hear it. And it's wonderful. We're going to talk about it a little bit more in a minute. We shall, because it's really, really cool. So, here you go. Now, did you notice how marvelously Haydn did the lead back to the exposition, the repeat? I left it in so you could hear that the music goes back to the start again. You know, one of the wonderful things about mature Haydn is that he found ways to make everything interesting. All those sort of joints and seams that in other composers are just perfunctory. It's like, oh, time for the repeat, stop, go back, No, Haydn makes something of it. And he really does that here. He does it beautifully. He does it wonderfully in the finale, too. Haydn intended his repeats, I've said this a million times, to be heard. And the fact that 99% of the time you won't hear second half repeats is a shame, because he's thought about them. He thinks about everything, all of those things. He doesn't take anything for granted and makes something original or surprising or fascinating out of all of those moments. So I wanted you to hear that. The other thing I wanted you to pay particular attention to is the passage, the motion music that leads to the second subject, the second theme, and then that second theme itself. First of all, the motion music. It's a whirlwind of triplets. It's a marvelous example of how you can make music fantastically interesting just by varying the articulation. Articulation is how the notes connect to each other. You can play them separate, staccato, cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha, or legato, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, like that. Or you can slur them, da-da-da-da-do-do-do-do-do. Haydn does all of that in this little passage, and that gives it just has an energy it wouldn't otherwise have, and an ear-catching amount of detail. And when you consider all it's doing is going cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha, I mean, it's not musically necessary in the sense that it's like an important thing, but it's going to be really important in the development section. It's not important yet, let's put it that way. But he draws your attention to it. He makes you sit up and notice it and go, oh, isn't that interesting? Really cool, even though it's not one of the main themes. And then the second subject, bum bum ba yada da yada da da dum bum. It doesn't settle into the second or dominant key. It's a modulating second subject as it keeps changing keys. It goes up a scale. Dum bum ba da dum bum bum ba da dum bum bum. It's like that. It's a sequence, as they call it in the musical biz. But it's meaning a repeated thing of different degrees of the scale. And in that sense, it is a new way of looking at the music of the introduction and the first subject, which is just that rising scale thing that goes up and then down. Well, this does the same thing, but it does it in a totally different way. It does it by changing key with each step. And it's a wonderful second subject. So I want you to hear that whirlwind triplet thing, and then the second subject, and how that keeps the music moving forward, because it doesn't come to any point of rest. It's always going somewhere, even though it's not, trumpets and drums. It's not militant. It's not loud. It's gracious, but it's moving and gracious. It's got business to mind. Here it is. Isn't that cool? I just think that's really, really cool. It's a fabulously ear-catching thing. Haydn does not have to be fast and loud and bumptious to make sounds that we find irresistibly attractive and intriguing. Now, the second movement is a theme in variations of a type that Haydn was absolutely famous for. It's in moderate march tempo, and the fascinating thing about it, one of the fascinating things about it, is that the theme itself audibly derives from the second subject of the first movement. So I'm going to play the second subject of the first movement, then there's a little gap, and then I play the opening theme of the second movement, and you'll hear just how closely related they are. So here it is. Now, you may notice this, I played the whole theme once through, but it's in typical variation form. That is AABB. It has two halves, both repeated. I just played it once through. Notice how interesting the harmony gets in the second half of that theme. Haydn always does this. He always does something interesting as the music proceeds to keep us riveted. And riveted we are. This beautiful movement, this is a fun movement, it really is. The first variation is a bassoon solo. And bassoon solos are going to feature throughout this symphony. It's something that Haydn's doing. Another thing that he will be doing throughout this symphony, and you may have noticed it right at the beginning, is he's using invertible counterpoint. Yeah, of course you noticed it, right? You heard it and you went, drat! That's invertible counterpoint, right? And what I mean is that he often writes two musical lines simultaneously, and they can flip. So you have to pay attention to the bass lines in this symphony. You really, really do. And when you play the whole thing for yourself, you'll notice that very clearly. And as this theme proceeds, first you have this lovely bassoon solo, and then you get these counter melodies on top of it. And these counter melodies become more and more prominent as the variations proceed. There are only like 4 of them. There's not a lot of them. And then, oh, this is the fun part. Trills begin to take over the music. You know what a trill is? When you go between 2 notes really quick. That's a trill. Well, they become like maniacal. This is the revenge of the trill, this movement. So even though the music is based on, the second subject, which is in turn based on the introduction, et cetera, this movement does its own thing. And the wonderful thing about it doing its own thing is that as Haydn builds up this 2-part counterpoint in layers, the trills become their own character in this particular symphonic drama. It's extraordinary. They begin in like the 3rd variation, and then they just become more and more prominent until finally it's like Trill City. So I'm going to play you the last minute so you can hear when those little suckers begin to simply overwhelm the rest of the music. It's funny, and it's eccentric, and you've never heard anything in the whole classical period that sounds remotely like this. There just isn't anything. We don't hear trills like this till we get to like Beethoven's late piano sonatas. It's really, really remarkable. So here's the end of the slow movement. Wow, is that unusual? Very, very unusual, individual, and splendidly witty. Okay, now the minuet, the third movement, does an up and down scaly type thing, as you might expect. And it's also full of double counterpoint, melodic counterpoints and things as it proceeds. Like a lot of Haydn's minuets of this period, he's not afraid to abandon that just rigid dance-like meter and create longer lyrical lines and interludes that are often quite pensive, thoughtful music that gives it a depth that you wouldn't expect in a normal dance movement. And this is one of those as well. So I'm going to play you the complete minuet. The trio, the middle section, is another bassoon solo, and that's all you need to know about that. When you listen to it yourself, you'll hear the bassoon solo. But this is a curiously thoughtful, I think is the word, minuet. Beautiful, beautiful moments of harmonic light and shade. Here it is. I really love this movement. I just think it has a tremendous amount of character. And you can't just throw away the third movement anymore. As in so many other symphonies of the classical period, it's not just there because, because you have to do a dance thing. It's there because it contributes, a different feeling, an emotional complexity. Adds to the emotional complexity and variety of the symphony, and that's just marvelous. Again, it's another example of Haydn not taking anything for granted and always doing something interesting and necessary and unexpected with things that so many other composers didn't seem to care about very much, but just did them because they felt they should, not because they needed to. The finale. Okay. Now, the finale is in sonata form, like the first movement. It's another one of those. It has a very, very, it's more elaborate in the up phase of the scale passage and very simple in the down phase. Yeah, bum, bum. The down phase is quite simple, but you will hear the rising scale or arpeggio formula from the introduction, the simple descent. And this also has a definite second subject, which is distinct from everything else. It's nice. It's a completely different theme that doesn't relate to anything other than itself, which is great. You got to have variety. You always have to have variety. And so I will play you the exposition with the lead back, so you can also hear how natural that sounds and how splendidly Haydn has fashioned that. And then I can turn you loose on the whole symphony. This is a wonderfully elegant movement. It really is. It flows like quicksilver. It has this wonderful feeling of fluidity and movement. Movement is such a wonderful thing when you have it. So many composers didn't. They sound labored. But Haydn's always just goes like impelled by the wind. Here is the exposition of the finale. And that's it. That's number 91. Like I said, it's not a one of those symphonies that's, supercharged with material and other stuff. It explains itself as it goes, and it gives you a nice warm hug while you listen to it. It's so emotionally engaging. And there's something about its key too, E flat major. Stringed instruments, for reasons string players can tell me, seem to sound especially radiant in E flat major. At least when Haydn writes for the E flat major, they do. There's a luminosity to this symphony that's really, really beautiful. Part of it comes from the fact, I think, that all of the main themes rise initially. They all begin with phrases that are moving towards the light. They see the light, and then they come back down, of course. But there's always this upward feeling, an upward and forward movement. And so, although it's written for a small orchestra, the symphony has real energy and vitality to it. It's a beautiful work. It doesn't deserve its neglect. Chamber orchestras all over the universe should play it regularly. It would make a wonderful, wonderful concert opener, for example, if you don't want to make it like the pièce de résistance. Not everything has to be a big, weighty, overbearing statement. I mean, we love them. The more overbearing, the better. But this one is Haydn's farewell to symphonies without trumpets and drums, to chamber symphonies, as we called them much later. Haydn wouldn't have thought of them at all. He would have thought of it as a pretty grand symphony, because there's a full woodwind section and everything else, or mostly full. Until clarinets arrived, it was a full woodwind section, and a wonderful range of feeling, like nothing else he wrote, or anybody else for that matter. So keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.